Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build and sustain a better creative business. Today on the show, we have my good friend, Jonas Saul. I have to always make sure that I'm not saying K at the end of that because his name is so close to Jonas Salk. Weirdly, he says he only has ever had that happen once in his life, which I just can't imagine. But we are not interviewing Jonas Salk. We are interviewing Jonas Saul, who is a 3 million plus selling author of amazing thrillers. He writes the Sarah Roberts series, which is hugely successful. He is launching the 24th book in that series today when this launches. So, if you like this episode, make sure to go and pre-order the book. And I met Jonas at a writers conference a couple of years ago, and you never know who you're going to connect with at these conferences, right? But he was a judge for the pitch contest with me that first night, and we were on a panel together, and we just clicked. We both have run other businesses before we started writing. We both kind of dug the same deep dives into writing theory and process and sales and all of those amazing things. And I am so excited to finally have him on the show. If you listen to our online writers conference, he was one of our keynote speakers, and I was finally able to sit down with him and have a one-on-one conversation to talk about everything from whether he thinks about how just disabled his characters would be after all of the things that happened to them, to how he constructs a series, and a whole lot more. I'm trying kind of a new format, at least with my good friends when it comes to this show, where I'm doing a lot of research, I'm reading their books, but then I'm trying to have just sort of a more casual, deep dive conversation instead of the what are you passionate about these days start, trying to have a little bit more fun with it. And I'd love to know what you guys think. So if you could email me at russell@wannabepress.com, let me know what you think of the new format. I would really appreciate it. If you want to learn how to write a great novel, then I have a 4-hour free writing course at thecompletecreative.com/novel. You can take it, learn everything that I've learned about novels from writing 20 of them and talking to hundreds of authors about them as well. I do hope you take it. I hope you enjoy it. And now let's get on with the show. So I have a question for you. It's a really important question. Are you aware how close your name is to Jonas Salk? And do people accidentally call you Jonas Salk often, or did they at some point do that? Because I've known you now for years, and every time I talk to you, I have to spend 5 minutes not putting the K at the end of your name.
Yeah, no, it's happened once in my life. Once. That's it. Not many people even know that name, I think. At least the people I talk to.
That's it's all I think about. It's all I think about, right? From like he writes great books, and like I have to make sure that he's not K. You are on my online writers conference, and I literally spent 10 minutes before the beginning of the day. Do not put the K in there. Do not put the K in there. Do not put the K in there. There's no K.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, no, only happened once.
Wow. I guess I'm not shocked, but I'm also kind of shocked. So I want to ask you about Sarah.
Sure.
Before we really dive in. Do you ever start a book and think, man, like she would be so crippled right now if she were a real human? Because I just read the second book in the series, and I believe she gets knocked out about 3 times, gets shot twice, and like that's all within the first half of the book. And then some other stuff happens also, and she just gets like beaten. She gets I think punched in the stomach towards the end, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, my God, like this woman must have to have like 8 months of recovery afterwards. And then like at the end, I won't tell people what happened at the end. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, especially that the ending. That's a good thought. I mean, I really don't. Once the book is written and I've abused my characters, and I move on, there's often several months between the books in, say, fictional time. And in some cases, I've even gave a couple years. There was, after book 20, there was a 2-year hiatus, and book 21 is called Sarah's Return, because that's, she's back. So there was a lot of healing, and a lot of that does happen. But in one book she breaks her foot, and in book 10 at the end, and in book 11 she's limping on a cast the whole book. So there definitely, in book 5, she has a fight in a warehouse with this martial arts woman who ends up stabbing her several times with a fork. So it's some really unique scenes and crazy stuff. But yes, she has many scars, and nothing ever life-threatening, though. Never hit any arteries. I want to keep her throughout the series, so I don't ever make it too damaging.
Because I write fantasy, and most of my characters are either magic or can get healed by magic easily, and so I always wonder when people write, when people who are writing thrillers or contemporary, really it's thrillers, because if you write contemporary romance, there's usually not a lot of fighting happening in those books. I would hope. So I always wonder if people who are writing high action scenes, what their process is between books for how their people heal, or if they even, I would imagine Jack Reacher doesn't really think about that very much because he's just supposed to be a superhuman, but maybe they do.
Yeah, that's a greit question. I think that it's important to, something Stephen King says is the mark of a good writer is to remember every scar. And I don't know if that literally means the scars. It means all the details, really. But at the end of the day, you really do have to memorize. And when you write something of an injury of some sort, you must remember that it's there. Even if somebody gets a black eye in another scene, it's nice to have somebody else comment on it. Oh, what happened to your eye? So, you don't forget these things. But personally, I've broken several bones in my body. I've been sucker punched. I've had my front teeth smashed out once. I've had a lot of injuries myself, and so when I write these kinds of injuries for Sarah, I know how fast it healed. My back broke. I knew how fast it healed, and I knew over 6 to 8 weeks the bones fuse and you move on. Shots of Demerol and whatever. So I just throw Sarah into scenes where she won't be crippled, but she definitely has a pile of scars.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. Sarah is now, the 24th book is going to be coming out, right? 24?
Yeah, 2 weeks today.
How? So I'm reading the 5th book in one series and the 7th book in another series. And the thing that I have learned writing these much longer series and novels are a lot more complex with this than comics are. How do you keep all of the information straight when you're writing a series that long to make sure you stay in continuity?
Great question. That's it. I don't know if there's an easy way to describe how. I do find it quite challenging. So what I do, one of the things I really focus on is not adding something to her life, or how do I say it? For me, each book is its own villain. We'll call it a villain. Each book is its own entity. It has its own thing to deal with. And at the end of each book, standalone. It's almost like, say, think of Criminal Minds. If you're familiar with Criminal Minds, they have a case to deal with. They deal with the case. It's over at the end, and the plane takes off. And then, the next episode, they have another case to deal with, but you have the same characters. So this is sort of what Sarah's dealing with in book to book to book. So I remember book 10. I know what she was dealing with. I know what city she was in. A lot of these things have to do with memory. I remember each book, but I don't remember, say, scene by scene of each book, but I know who she was dealing with and who the bad guys were, and so on. Like book 15, it was a cartel in Mexico she was dealing with, and I just remember a lot of that stuff. That being said, though, each book takes a certain amount of research and a certain amount of notes that I take, and I keep all of my notes. All my notes are handwritten. As I research and make notes. So at any point, even in this book coming out in book 24, there's a reference to one of my characters and something he dealt with even before book 1. Or there's another reference for Sarah and what she dealt with. Oh, remember when this happened when we were in Los Angeles back at this time? And a lot of that I say because it's important to the current plot. That being said, though, I have my notes right here. I can just open them up and say, oh, yeah, it was Maxwell they were dealing with in book 5. Or book 6 when she was in Las Vegas. So a lot of times I can just pull a book, my notes out and refer to something. So keeping the information available to me book to book is quite simple because it's all right here beside me at my desk. But that being said, though, each book is its own entity going forward, and I have an idea of who the bad guy is or what I'm going to be dealing with, or the bad group of people, whether it's a street gang or a mafia, or it's a cartel or whatever. And we just go through the book going forward, pushing the plot forward for each book without regard to the other books. Other than, as I said, character evolvement, I do know that Sarah is a different woman for having been through some of the other books and the things she's gone through. So each book, I do make sure we see a little of that evolving character.
Well, and I know that travel is a big part of these books and that Sarah is either always or very often in a new city. So do you think that also helps because you don't have to keep the continuity of like where Johnny's Bagels is and where like these people are? You can sort of wipe the slate clean, not just because it's a standalone, but also because you're in generally another place every book?
Absolutely. I mean, you're so right. I'd say that about half the series is written out of Toronto, but I was born and raised in Toronto. So I for several years in my late teens and early 20s, I was a broker for a company and salesman in that area. So I know the streets of Toronto, and I've lived in many, from downtown to Mississauga to all different parts of Toronto. So Sarah currently lives with her boyfriend in the Greater Toronto area. And yet what you just said is true, though, because she does go to Europe. She does go to all over Hungary, Amsterdam, Greece. She spends a lot of time in Greece. There's several books that takes place in Greece. So I do like to have Sarah going to all these different places and keeping it fresh. Although when she is in Toronto, the areas and locations that she's in are familiar to me. Like, you could go to Google Maps, but I mean, I just know all these streets because bear in mind, something else that really works for me is write what you know. There's all kinds of quotes like that, write what you know, or write what you want to know, and all these other things, but which I'm sure you're more than familiar with. But the write what you know, well, I know Toronto, and I know the apartment I lived in. So Sarah and Aaron live in the apartment I lived in. So I know the interior of that building. I've been up and down that elevator. I've so many times that I don't even have to look at any of this stuff or research any of that stuff. I just know it.
Yeah, that must be. It must be comforting to write in realistic fiction to write like things that you know. The comfort I think in writing fantasy, which is more what I do, is you can blow up a city. So my theory of how to keep things in continuity is people go to a place and then they learn about that place until I feel like I'm going to break continuity, and then they leave that place and they can only return to that place once it's blown up and like completely different, and then the continuity once again does not have to be the same.
Right. No, fair enough. Yeah, that could even make it easier. But no, I'm rooted in the realistic, the cities, the towns, the places she goes. It's all, I'm just writing a thriller, so I don't get that luxury that the fantasy has there.
What do you think it is about Sarah that like people latch onto so much, that like made her popular and it keeps people coming back? I'm always fascinated about these characters who seem to like latch on to the public, the public zeitgeist, and almost build on a life of their own, where other characters may have like not been able to do so. So what do you think it is special about Sarah that allows her to sort of inhabit this 1 million books, or 3 million books, I think I read last time, that have been sold in the series?
If I could sum it up into one word, I would say emotion. Sarah is an extremely emotional woman who cares deeply for the suffering that we have as human beings that we live with. And she feels duty bound to ease the suffering amongst as many people as she can. She's been through so much in her life, and she just, I really feel that emotion. Emotion is on every page of every novel I write. Even if it's not an emotional journey, it's an emotion. It's a word referencing an emotion or something. Sarah just cares so deeply, and she spends her life dealing with these bad guys or whatever she's dealing with to help the weaker or the underdog or someone who doesn't know what's coming or can't help themselves. And when she deals with it, I mean, it's every emotion from anger to joy to tears. She's so strong and nothing will get in her way kind of attitude, but yet she'll crumble and cry on a moment's notice if she hasn't been able to deal with something and lives were lost. And she just cares so much, almost too much. And I do think what you said was true, that a lot of readers have found within a book or two of reading her, often 3 books. Well, they say 3 books is where a reader will learn to trust an author. I think that when you read 3 books in the same series, you start to learn to trust the characters. And once I've got a reader who's hit book 4, book 5, book 6, they generally don't stop the series. They will read them all, even if some people. I've had an email from readers that say, well, I read the first Sarah book on Monday, and it's Friday, and I've read all 20. And they'll read them all in 4 or 5 days. They just cannot get enough Sarah. And they're emailing me, when's the next one? Oh my goodness, I can't wait. It's 2 more months to the next one. I can't wait. They just cannot get over Sarah and how much she cares.
The thing that I love, I think that that's all right. I mean, I know when people come to me and I sort of ask them like what they responded to specifically in like the Katrina or the Gods Respond popular book, they say, like, I like going into a world where like the characters do a thing, like they will not be stopped until they complete this thing, especially because we as people often feel sort of helpless. I mean, especially now in the time that we live in. And they always talk to me about how like they don't feel helpless when they read the book. Like they can sort of inhabit these characters who have their own agency. And I when I was reading the Sarah book that I read, I definitely felt that about her. Like she almost gave me agency to feel like I was more powerful than I was while I was reading it.
Oh, right. I see what you mean. Yeah. She's got a mouth on her too, and she doesn't take any crap sort of thing. But it's only if someone's pushing. She doesn't like disrespect. She really stands up. I mean, I've had several emails from readers. I had one reader who's going into cancer treatment, a surgery for cancer or something, and she emailed me and said that her odds weren't that high, but she was going in to fight because in her mind, Sarah was with her and she was going to fight as strong as Sarah could. And the next day I got an email saying surgery was successful because I had Sarah. Things like this that are very moving to me, that the readers are so in love with her that they've changed how they have their outlook on things. I had one woman who emailed me and said that Sarah inspired her to leave an abusive man. Walking down the street at 4 a.m. with her child on her hip and no money in her pocket because Sarah would do that. And it's just so moving to me because Sarah is so damn tough that these women who need a moment to be tough, attach themselves to her and then reached out to me after and told me what they've done. It's just very important to have these elements in fiction because they really help build empathy and spread more wonderful emotion.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
I was reading, I think before book 23 came out, or maybe book 22 on your Facebook, on your Facebook page, and you were talking about it, and there were like 3 or 4 replies from people that were like, nothing better happened to Aaron this time, or like, Aaron better be okay. And I was so struck by like that it wasn't just the main character that people had grown fond of, but it was also, I believe it was Aaron, the love interest that Sarah has, and like they were like cajoling you to make this fictional human who doesn't actually exist, like, but it exists very much in their mind and in their lives.
Yes, 100%. There was a scene in particular in book 22 that Aaron got a lot of trouble. I'll just say a lot of damage happened to Aaron, more than I think I've ever written in any book to Sarah's love interest. And yeah, it was, I don't regret writing that scene, but I do know that there were a lot of readers who were upset over that scene. Not upset to the degree that they would stop reading. They lost their interest or something, but emotionally attached, and it hurt. I have had readers tell me that I've made them cry over that scene. So it's a pretty brutal scene in book 22, and Aaron barely survives that scene. But there was a purpose to it. There was. And without going into it too much, Aaron was losing his faith in what they were doing as a couple. And at the end of the book, he does make some changes because of what happened. And I needed him to be in that position for the beginning of book 23. Like, I do plan, in fact, things that are happening in this current book are I'm setting plans in motion for books 2, 3, and 6 away from now. I really do structure a lot. You're just getting, each book is a glimpse of where they're at in their, I like to use the word evolve, where they're at in their evolving state of being, really. So yeah, there are things for 2 books now. I've been setting up something with her sister, Sarah's sister, that isn't going to be revealed until the next book. So lots coming for sure. But yeah, I understand. You're right. It really is about the love of each character, and Aaron, and there's a lot of love for Parkman, Sarah's confidant, who's actually Parkman. Other than Sarah, Parkman's been in every book but the first one. Sarah met Parkman in book 2, and he's been in every book since. Aaron didn't come into the picture till book 5. So it really does. They really do. And lately, Alex, another character, has been getting a lot of the spotlight, if you will. After book 21 and 22, there's a lot more comments I'm getting about. I would love to learn more about Aaron. So in this recent book 24, Alex, love to learn more about Alex. In this recent book 24, Alex plays a star role in the recent book. So I know the readers are going to love that.
Awesome. You talked about structure. I use something called, I always forget the name of it, the Levitt's paradox, which I learned from Alan Moore, to set my stuff, which is basically every book is an A, B, C, and D story, and they all get a percentage of the time. And then, like, once the A story is done in that book, like, the B story becomes the A story, and the C story becomes the B story, and the D story becomes the yada 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 on kind of like throughout the course. So there's always something similar. There's always 1, 2, or maybe 3 things simmering below the surface, and then there's like that one main driving force that's going forward. And I kind of felt that. Again, like, I'm now 20 books behind. I did not have Monday to Friday to read all 20 books, but it definitely felt like there was this undercurrent in the second book. There was the main thriller plot and like a couple of twists that I absolutely loved. But then there was the underlying story, which was about Sarah trying to find her sister's killer. And does that sort of how you plan your structure, where there'll be sort of the overarching story, and then you're setting like little things up, and then there's like one understory that kind of goes between multiple books so that you can kind of pull people along even though you have a standalone? Or how do you think about structure?
You know what? You pretty well just answered it. That's exactly what I do. I do it like, I've spent so much time in Hollywood talking to execs there since 2014, and they talk a lot about the big bad and having this arching, this wide storyline behind the scenes, not just a subplot, but something driving everything. So like, in the warning, when you're reading that, you're right. It's ultimately about Sarah finding her sister's murderer, but that book ends and she hasn't. But that book had a different someone else that she had to deal with. and each step pushes to the next. And in the crypt, the book 3, other things happen to get her closer to the killer. Many times I do that. Many times, in fact, sometimes I culminate. Everything comes together and it's over. For instance, I think it was book 8. Everything came together everywhere in every plot line and everything. So when I started book 9, killing Sarah, I had to come up with something completely different and start a whole new, under the behind the scenes thing. So book 9, 10, and 11 are all connected, those 3, because book 9, something happens that's terrible. And then book 10, the antagonist, it happened so bad, it's so terrible that Sarah got really upset with herself because of something she misread. So in book 9. So in book 10, the antagonist, Sarah is the antagonist. She's out there antagonizing people now. She's somewhat lost her mind because she's just filled with such rage at what had happened in book 9. And she won't even talk to her friends, won't deal with anybody. Parkman's out of her life. Everyone's out of her life in that book, and they don't want to be. So you know what I mean? Like it because of book 9, no. So finally, book 10 ends, and she finds out all the truth. And in book 11, The Redeemed, it's called The Redeemed because she's trying to redeem herself with everybody that she's made mistakes with while dealing with a serial killer in Los Angeles. And so it's as she deals with these individual storylines and villains, there is another story behind the scenes that she has to manage at the same time, always happening. In book 21, 22, 23, 24, she's dealing with all of that. In book 21, she had a miscarriage, and she was trying to wanted to raise a family and blah, blah, blah. And now in this book, it was just announced in the last book that Sarah's pregnant again. So, and what's happening, in these 2 books are leading into the next 2, 3, and 6 books. Like but at the same time, we are dealing with individual standalone villains. You're right. I do prefer to have that story in the background, though, throughout it all.
Well, I think that's important even in the new series that I'm working on is much more serial. Like most of the work that I've done is standalone, even in a universe just like the Sarah Roberts books. But this new one I'm dealing with is much more serial. Like there's massive cliffhangers at the end of every book. But I think even when you're working on something that's serial like that, you have to make the piece of the story that they get in each book have a satisfactory ending. So there has to be something that resolves, even if you're resolving the B story or the C story or the B and C story, but keeping the A story going. I think that people have to have some sense that they accomplished something. Otherwise, they're going to leave unsatisfied, and they might begrudgingly go to the next book, but like they are less likely to excitedly go there. Whereas if you can, even in a long book, give some sense that like, oh, they accomplished this thing. Like they stopped the Wicked Witch, even though they didn't like stop the overall bad guy. Like, but they had, this book is about this end plot. People, I think, are just like in a TV show where you watch a TV show that's serialized, but like every episode still has a beginning, middle, and end. So it keeps people having to tune in because they haven't gotten the full story, but they have gotten a satisfactory chunk of it every week.
100%. I made that mistake once with Sarah, the Sarah series, and I think I made it I'll call it a half of a mistake. But you do need to have the beginning, the middle, and the end, and finish off that story each time. And I do that in every book. I just don't think I did it well enough in book 4. Yeah. That is the weakest book I wrote for Sarah. I say weak because I still see her dealing with the villain in book 4, the bad guy, and everything else happened in book 4, and I still see it coming together. But the book 4 did end with a cliffhanger, and it was a rather large one. And I do have some reviews saying, yeah, I'm done. I'm not going to be forced to buy book 5 to make sure I see what happens. And that's when I realized, ooh, yeah, okay, I'm not going to leave it with that much of a cliffhanger anymore. So I have left tiny cliffhangers, but none to the degree that I did in book 4. So I did learn my lesson on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's always that balancing act because you have to you have to make it exciting enough, and every chapter and all the cliffhangers to and all the twists to like make someone want to read to the end and then buy the next book. But you also have to make it satisfying enough that they have a complete story at the end of each book. And it's always like, how far do you go on the tying everything off to leaving everything open spectrum?
100%. So true. I know I've written almost 40 novels now, so I'm thinking I'm getting used to that now. And I, the temperature, I can check the temperature, and I think I'm pretty good now at that. But I think that in book 4, in book 5, in book 6, when I was still somewhat new at this writing thing, I wasn't as qualified. And yeah, it was book 4 where I made that mistake. But you know what? I didn't edit it or change it. I left it the way it was because I still see this, the villain you're introduced to in book 4 still gets dealt with in its own way. But yeah, that cliffhanger is for me, I love cliffhangers. I love massive ones. And then I'm salivating to grab the next book. I don't know if everyone's like that. So I prefer to build a readership and not lose a readership. So I don't do the massive cliffhanger anymore. I just do a subtle one at the end of each book.
Yeah, we've talked before about how it basically took until the 10th book release before the Sarah Roberts Chronicles, the Sarah Roberts books really like took off. Do you if I'm wrong, please like correct me if that's wrong, but like what do you think it was about having 10 books or a bunch of books in that series that like suddenly people were like, all right, en masse willing to like sign on?
Great comment. You're right. We did talk about that. I remember that conversation, and you're right. It was 10 books, and I with each book, as I brought out book 5 and book 6, I saw a small bump in sales, or I saw, more day-to-day readers of the other books and book 7 and 8. But it wasn't until about book 9 or 10, I actually would mark it as book 10. And I think that's what our conversation was in the past. But around book 10, it's where it doubled. Everything doubled and then tripled. By book 11, it just kept going, and sales, I think by the time I hit book 14 or so, I'd already hit my first million. It just shot straight up on that graph. Now, one, I don't think I can pinpoint. Here it is. It was A and it was B. I don't think I can pinpoint exactly what causes that, but I can tell you what Dean Wesley Smith once said, and he said that when you have 10 books. As an author, when you hit the 10 book mark, that's when you have an internet presence. And I think he was talking about the 10 book mark is where you're in a category of your own, and in book 11, book 12, book 13, all you're doing is increasing your brand and your notoriety and your internet presence and so on. But he really put the number at 10 books is where you can take off as an author. And I didn't see that at book 3 or 4 at all. I didn't see it at book 7. I saw it at book 10, and I remembered I had written his quote down in 2010 when I had one book, and thought, okay, I'm gonna write like a madman and get to 10 books, and we'll see if he's right. And he was. So I don't know what actually causes that, but I do know that by book 12, it was 2013. Yeah, early 2013, I had my 12th book out, and I got an email from Hollywood asking who's handling my film and TV rights. And by the end of 2014, I was in LA and pitching studios, Universal, Sony, and so on. And that was at that point, I hit book 14. So not only were my sales, I was on the charts in the top 100 on Amazon, but in addition to that, now I'm pitching in Hollywood. So the 10 book mark was where everything took off. And to this day, I have so much that's happening that I can't talk about yet.
Is that 10 books in one series, or just 10 books overall?
I would say 10 books overall, period. Overall, because Sarah didn't hit book 10 till The Antagonist, which was, trying to remember when that came out, maybe 2015. Because I was at 10 books overall. When I first went to LA, I was only on book 8 or 9 in Sarah. because I've written 5 or 6 other standalones.
Awesome.
I say 5 or 6 because I've got a couple of others that I've got one book sitting at a publisher waiting for an offer. I've got another book sitting at another publisher who's just agreed to take it on, and I can't talk about that one either because the contracts haven't been signed. I've got another 2 books that aren't published that are waiting, and I've got so much going on behind the scenes that I'm actually sitting at over 40 books, but I'm losing track. My agent's managing it all, and when I write, I mean, I'm doing 80 to 90,000 words, maybe 100,000. You're only looking at 350 page novels.
Yeah.
My longest one is 150,000 words.
When you trying to figure out how to ask this question, because so most people have a I'm just going to call it negative opinion of self-publishing still in this world, and that when you start self-publishing, like it means you can no longer have an agent, or like that there's this bifurcation of like the minute that you start self-publishing, like you suddenly are completely tainted from the ability to do anything related to publishers again. And I love your story because like it was not like clearly like this is a I don't want to say condemnation, but it certainly is a refutation of the old, like if you self-publish, you'll never get a publishing deal, which I mean, I think I still can't believe that we're in a world in 2020 where like people are talking about that. But I would love for you to tell the story that you told me about how you got that first publishing deal and the agent who called the publisher, and like 20 minutes later you like had a huge offer, or like an hour later you had a huge offer. Just tell that story so people can kind of understand that like self-publishing and publishing, traditional publishing can sort of work hand in hand together with each other.
Sure. There's a lot of, it's multifaceted, but I'll try and keep it simple. First, let me just start by saying, so many, and I say this at many conferences, so many people concern themselves with the words self-publishing and then the words legacy or traditional, and it's one or the other, and versus and so on. I like to think of it as this: professional versus not professional or unprofessional. And what I mean by that is there are traditionally published authors with traditionally published novels, signed contracts that aren't professional. The cover doesn't look good. The blurb has a mistake. Or flip it the other way. There are self-published authors who look very professional. So I decided, self-published or not, I'm going to be professional. I'm going to have a professional cover. I'm going to have professional editing. I'm going to make sure my image, my brand, I'm going to incorporate a company. My publishing company is going to be an incorporation, is going to be publishing all my works. I'm going to treat this like I'm running a business, because I've been a business owner for years. I ran retail stores for 20 years. And so I opened up a company and started selling Sarah Roberts through my company. And so I approached this professionally. So I was interviewed in 2014. I was completely self-published, and I was doing this podcast with this interview, and that's when they said to me, "Who's your publisher?" And I said, "Oh, well, I just, I'm self-published. I put it all on Amazon." And they said, "Oh, by your rank and your covers and your whole, I didn't know. We thought you were public." They thought I was. "Who's your agent?" I didn't have one. So that's what I mean by being professional. It's so important. So the point, to further to that then, take your professionalism out into the street, into the market, and your readers will see that. And so hence comes readers' trust, and so on and so on. So the story goes, I'm pitching in Los Angeles, and I've been there 2 years now. I'm working with Brian Graydon Media, and we've seen everybody. I've got an offer from Sony Pictures on the table. And I'm reading this offer, and I'm going to a gathering, and I meet some other writers at this wine meet and greet on Sunset Boulevard. We're all having wine one night, and several other authors that are there that have agents. And I had a professional business card. I think you've even seen it. We're chatting. And who's your agent? I don't have one. I'm doing all this on my own. I'm my own agent, representing myself at these meetings and so on. And so the next morning, I got an email from my current agent, who I did sign with. And we had a long conversation for an hour and a half. And she said, "Oh, I know exactly," in reference to what you said about selling the series, she said, "Oh, I know exactly who would love to buy the Sarah Roberts series." And bear in mind, this is the Sarah Roberts series. I'm at 2 million or almost 2 million books sold at that time in 2016. Now it's 2016. And I've been selling Sarah on Amazon for 5 years. And this publisher bought the series. Self-published books. They bought self-published books. And how it worked, that was a 2-hour mark. My agent reached out and said to me, well, she said, "Look, I want to sign you," and blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Great." We had a great chat, and I checked her out. She checked me out. And so we're ready to go. She said, "Yeah, but look, I think I know who can buy this." So anyway, she called me back 2 hours later and said, yeah, they've already read, the agent was a speed reader. She had given him the book the night before, unbeknownst to me. And he'd read it. Dark Visions, book 1. And then there you have it. It was like within 2 hours, they were already going to the board to get an offer on the table. And it was a really, really good offer. And I took it. And I didn't sell my ebooks, though. I only sold the rights to everything but ebooks, the individual serialized books that are on Amazon. I wouldn't sell those. Well, I would, but it would be a lot more money.
So I love that story because it shows, like, I always tell people, I'm like, hey man, if you put a book out there that sucks and doesn't sell, like, it's going to hurt you. But if you do a book that sells and like does well and it looks professional and it kind of sometimes doesn't even have to like sell that well, it just looks professional, it is professional, like, then you have a better shot or an equal shot. Like, it doesn't kill your chances. What kills your chances is if you put up a book that looks horrible and reads horrible and like blurbs horrible and just like it's not good. So but I love your idea of professional versus unprofessional, because I always think when people say, "Oh, are you self-published?" I say no. I run a company called Wannabe Press, and they publish my work. But like that is the publishing company. Just like if the head of Simon and Schuster published a book, he or she would not be self-published. They would be working for their publishing company. And that really allows me to sort of have two hats. Like, publisher Russell has to deal with all the BS stuff that comes up with being a publisher and like protecting their client, protecting their customers and dealing with supply chain. And it allows writer Russell to sort of live in this different world. And people always ask me, how can you be good at like the creative part and the business part? And the only way I've been able to do it is literally just bifurcating myself and saying, this is for publisher Russell to handle, and this is for creative Russell to handle. And having them as two separate people sort of allows me to, I mean, I'm not really two separate people, but just in the mindset of two separate people, allows me to like, hey, I have to hit this deadline because my publisher needs it by that deadline. And then I can, as the publisher, set the production slate of when I need all of this stuff in. And I know it may sound a little wonky to do it that way. Or maybe it doesn't sound wonky, but for me, it helps because I, as the writer, am beholden to my publisher, Wannabe Press. And Wannabe Press is there to protect me, Russell Nolte, its most important asset.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
You know, you ran all of these companies, and one of the things that bonded us at the beginning was, you know, we both have run other companies before we started writing. What do you think you learned doing the running other businesses that you brought into writing that other writers can learn from and implement into their own creative lives to sort of make them run a little bit more like a business without that whole doing business things feels icky-ness that like people run into a lot when they're dealing with new writers?
Tricky question. I think that's just because at the end of the day, you know, my first answer, the first thing that popped in my head, you know, that old say whatever pops into your head. The first thing that came to my head was perseverance and discipline. Discipline was the one word that was flashing through my mind when you were asking the question. The reason I say that is because, you know, I've always believed, I've been self-employed since I left high school. And I've always believed that when you put your foot on the gas, you just can't let your foot off the gas when you're self-employed, or it all falls apart. And you really got to, sometimes you have to actually drop the pedal to the floor. And So there are many days where I do 15-hour days, 15, 17-hour days, and I catch a little sleep and I'm back at it. There were nights last week where I was working till 3:34 in the morning. And there was even a comment from another fellow writer who knows I'm in Greece and he knows the time here, and I'm posting at 3:30 in the morning that the ebook, the pre-order's up. And because I sometimes I just have to put my foot down on that gas. I'm a self-employed business owner, and you don't get the option to relax. And I love that, though. That's what motivates my plot, But I've always been this way, so I don't know if there's any kind of nugget of advice or something. But I guess all I can say is, if you're going to do this self-published, a lot of what you just said, Russell, in the previous question about a good book and a good cover and a professional image, focus on that first and get that first book up, or second or fifth book or whatever. But make sure that you've got beta readers, great editors, great cover. You've got a great book. Your image, everything is professional. Your social media is professional. You're not bantering or doing any kind of political speeches or anything out there on Facebook or something like that. You got to keep your author self to branding and your personal self to whatever you want now, But I just really believe in the discipline. I mean, there's another quote that Stephen King says, and I really follow a lot of what he says. And he says, talent, something like talent is as cheap as table salt. Everybody's got talent, but what separates the talented individual from the successful one is a lot of hard work. And this is hard work. This is something that I do every day, all the time. I mean, I've been writing since I was in my early teens, but to this day, for over 20 years, 25 years, I still read books on how to write. And I've written over almost 40 novels. I'm still reading books on how to write. I'm reading Saul Stein's book and many others. I just finished Benjamin Dreyer's book, and he's the copy chief at Random House. And he brought out a book called Dreyer's English. Great book. I learned so much in this book that I didn't know. So you really just got to keep developing and keep pushing and keep giving it and work a lot. Like I think I've written 8 books since I got to Greece, and I got to Greece last October. 5 of them are published of the 8 that I've written, and the other 3 are at publishers waiting for contracts. And I'm ready to finish another book that'll be coming out in October, and then another one that'll be coming out at Christmas. And like you, I've seen your history of how many you're writing. And I really think that's what you have to do. You want to do this? I mean, you got to give it everything and work all the time. And I'm loving it.
The word that comes to my mind is not just discipline, but focus. Because a lot of writers that I know, they move between everything all the time. Like they're like, I have 50 new projects that are coming up, and like it always is distracting their attention. And the thing that I always find so admirable about you and the work that you do is you have this focus of being able to stick to not just like one genre, but a lot of it is in the Sarah Roberts series. It's not in like 20 other series or 20 other like genres or 50 other different main characters. You're able to take all of that energy and remain focused on sort of this one brand for close to a decade. Like we're got to be coming up on a decade now if you started in 2012 or 13. And I think that it's not just the discipline to keep writing, it's the discipline to have a focus that allows people to find you and to break through this sort of noise. And the 8 years almost since you started publishing stuff, like things have been so different. Like things are like there's competition is so great now, and I almost feel like you have to have even more focus now than you ever had before, because it's so much harder to push through and make a name for yourself if you're starting today than even if you're starting just a couple of years ago.
Well, yeah, that's really, I would totally second that. It's focus. I agree. And you're right. I do stay really focused on the genre I'm in. And I have written a book, book 2 to this. I wrote a book called The Immortal Gene, which has nothing to do with Sarah. And book 2 I've now written. I wrote that in April, and it's at the publisher, at the editors. And I do stop between Sarah books to write another one. I wrote a book called The Drowning. It might not keep that title, but The Drowning is a complete standalone. And I wrote that in January, and it's out at another publisher right now. So I write a Sarah, and then I write another book. I write a Sarah. I'm working on a book called The Killback. You want to kill me? Well, I'm going to kill you back. Like, it's The Killback, and it's really cool book. I'm loving it. And I've got 2 or 3 others that are not Sarah's that I'm working on. But I am going to be bringing out a Sarah book every 8 to 10 weeks. Because Sarah is, my readers need, it's like Netflix. You need a new episode all the time. And my readers binge Sarah. So Sarah is going to be, I'm going to have a new, every 8 to 10 weeks, I'll have a new Sarah book for the next couple of years. Meanwhile, writing these other ones. But you're right, it's all focus. I'm in the same genre. And I'm just loving all the stuff that's coming.
We're getting near our time together, but I need to ask you a follow-up, because what I find is that I have this big universe that I've been developing for the last few years, and one that I'm writing in now. So I'm writing in the Godsverse, and I'm developing this series called the Obsidian Spindle Saga, where I finished about 4 books in that series, and it'll be out next year. And I find that that I get stuck with writing the Obsidian Spindle Saga after too long, or the Godsverse for too long, and moving between those 2 universes, or even writing a standalone, allows me to explore things in those books that I then can bring back and make my main series stronger, or it just breaks my the mental block, and giving myself the ability to continue to write and be productive, but in a different universe, or in a different book, or in a standalone book, allows like my brain to come up with interesting fixes to the problems in the other universe that I'm writing more of. Do you find that when you're breaking and writing a different book between your Sarah Roberts books?
I do. And I find that it's therapeutic, and it's also healing, because I do find that when I write Sarah, then Sarah, then Sarah, then Sarah, I feel burnt out. I believe it. I mean, by book 17, 18, I was feeling burnt out. Book 19 took me double the time to write it that I normally take to write a book. And book 20, I slogged with book 20 so long that at the end of book 20, I put I put afterwards in every book. And at the end of the afterword of book 20, I told my readers that we're taking a hiatus. I can't keep going right now. I couldn't continue to write Sarah. And I ended up taking 3 months short of 2 years before I wrote another Sarah book. So I burned myself out. And I now have learned that as long as I write something between Sarah, or work on something, or take 2 months off between Sarah or something, or whatever the case may be, I don't burn out. So I'm working a lot, so I'm able to still bring out Sarah books every 2 to 3 months. But I do believe what you just said. I really feel that that's therapeutic for me, to leave the Sarah world and write whatever I feel like.
Yeah, it's sort of that, like, what do they say in Hollywood? It's like with big time actors, it's like I'll do the one for the studio and the agents, then I'll do one for me.
Yep. And you know what? To some degree, Sarah is still for me, as it was in book 3 and 4 and 5. But it is one for the studios, sort of, as you say. Yep.
So we're nearing the end of our time together. I can't believe it's been an hour already, but I always like to end with the last piece that we talk about, to talk about the series that you have coming up, or like wherever you'd like to send the people. I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about Sarah here, especially because we've been dropping hints this time. But I'd love for you to talk about, one of your series, where you'd like people to go, what you think is the best representation of your career, where they should start, and like why they should go and check out this book.
Sure. All right. Well, one of my favorite quotes from a reviewer was, Sarah Roberts is 1 in a million. If you're her friend, she'll crawl through hell to protect you. If you're her enemy, she'll send you there. And so that's Sarah. She's a great character. I really love who she's become. And if I was going to send anybody to any of the books, it would be Dark Visions, book 1. Get to know Sarah when she's 18 years old. By book 2, she's 22 years old. And right now she's going to be turning 31 soon. And that's 24 books into the series. Book 1, I wrote almost 20 years ago, back in 2001, 2002. So it has been a while. And if I was to direct anybody to any of the books, I would just start at book 1 and Dark Visions and see where that takes you.
The thing I really like about Sarah Roberts is they're quite quick reads. You get into the action, but you also feel invested almost right away. You know, there's other you can read a lot of quick books and not feel invested in the character, and just like sort of be like, oh, I'm just gonna read this, and then, you know, it's a nice like palate cleanser for whatever other thing. But the thing I really like is like it's intense, and there's always something going on, but you also feel this very strong pull towards Sarah, and you feel invested in her quest.
Right. And when you said quick reads, I believe in writing in a way that there's the chapters are shorter, and it's the read itself is a quick read, even if it is 350 pages or 400. I really like to have a great pace and lots happening. There's no sagging middle. Really focus on an exciting book, you know.
Awesome. Well, I love it. And we always end the same way, which is give us a piece of advice that you'd like us to end with. Tell us where we can find you and online, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Geez, piece of advice. Oh, man, I have nothing off the top of my head. Okay, well, you can find me at jonassaul.com. Anywhere Jonas Saul, you could just, I think that would be the best, jonassaul.com. It has all the information there and lots of books, but Amazon's the best place for me. Several of my books are in the Amazon Kindle reading program, or Kindle Unlimited, I think it's called. So often you won't find my stuff, the Sarah Roberts series, anywhere other than Amazon. And geez, advice, just keep going, whatever you're doing. Put the gas down. Geez, I'm drawing a blank on advice.
No, it's great. I mean, that's good advice. You know, I always like to tell people, like so often you find people who they work in spurts. Like they'll be very productive for 3 months, and then they won't be productive for 8 months. And so when they're running, they have to run, like they have to go 120 miles an hour. But you mentioned earlier that like if you just keep going, you can go 60, 50 even, and still get to the same place that these people are going, killing themselves in like little spurts. So I come from sales, and I always believed that if you put in your 100 calls a day, like it would always bear out in the end, that like things would be better than you'd always have a pretty good month instead of going through the peaks and valleys. So, I mean, I love when people say to just keep going, because I found that if I just wake up and put my 5,000 words in a day or 3,000 words in a day or whatever you can do in a day, like eventually you have a book, and then you have 2 books, and then you have 10 books, and then you have 20 books. And, I think it's hard for you when like you're at the beginning of your career to really understand that 10 years later, you'll have a bunch of books. You'll have a body of work. Like if you just keep going, it might not be 20 books, it might not be 40 books, but it'll be a body of work that you can be known for, and that you can and that you can be proud of, as long as you keep going. But if you take your foot off the gas, then you're going to have to play catch up over time.
Yeah, exactly. It's bear in mind, one of the most successful authors in the world are prolific. They all have massive amount of books, a big catalog.
Absolutely. Well, Jonas, thank you so much for stopping by and taking some time from being in Greece to talk with us. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
So that was my interview with Jonas Saul, not Jonas Salk. It would have been a much, much different interview. If you enjoyed this one, please go check out Jonas's work. It is great. It's very fast-paced action adventure. I really dig Sarah Roberts. She's got that kind of like take no BS attitude that Katrina does. So I really, really appreciate that. Find him on social media. And let me know what you think of the new kind of format that I'm testing out. I'm doing less structure, more deep dive into specific series. I'm trying to do a whole lot more research on the guests and be able to read their books and study their work and kind of dig deeper on that. So let me know what you think about that, and I will see you next time. Oh, wait, before I go, if you want to learn more about writing a great novel, you can take my 4-hour masterclass at thecompletecreative.com/novel. Completely free, no tricks, no weapons, just skill against skill. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this show so you get it in your podcast player every single week. All right, that's it for me. I will see you next time.